You want the police involved. Okie dokie. So, the day after Christmas about 10 years ago, my brother called me up and asked me for some assistance setting up some of his new computer equipment. He lived down the road from a store that specialized in discount china, so naturally it was extremely busy. Busy as in, cars were parked everywhere, including on the grass in front of the store, and it was impossible to see around the corner if someone wanted to pull out of the furthest exit. Unfortunately, the speed limit, 50 miles per hour, is also extremely high on the road as well, even if you have to really try to accelerate to get to 50 miles per hour by the time you pass the store. So, I decided to play it safe and was doing roughly half the speed limit, perhaps 30 miles per hour, while going around the corner of this store. Even at this speed, of course some guy decided to pull out without checking, and I couldn't stop in time to avoid hitting him. Now, I was driving an older Mitsubishi that already had some damage, and he had a small dent in his fender, and, come on, it's still Christmas, right? So, I get out of the car, take a look at the damage, and turn around to see a furious, older, red-faced gentleman in front of me. Right after I tell him that it doesn't really look like much damage, so there's no need to contact the police, he proceeds to scream in my face about how I was speeding and this is all my fault. Oh no honey. A young woman driving by herself may appear to be easily intimidated, but I was trying to be nice. If you want the police involved, let's do it buddy. I call the non-emergency line, explain there was a very minor car accident, and that the other driver was insisting that it was my fault, so I would feel better if the police were involved. The dispatcher got my information, stopped for a moment, and then quietly thanked me for calling the appropriate number. 911 was hardly necessary, and told me that she also felt it would be safer for me if the police were dispatched. After a 30-minute wait, an officer showed up to the scene. I, not being a total moron, sat quietly in my car and waited for him to come over to me. The other driver felt it was necessary to leap out of his vehicle and run over to the officer and start screaming and gesturing wildly. I didn't catch what was said, but I did see the look on the cop's face, and I was getting more and more amused. After being clearly told to get back into his car, the cop came over to me and asked me what happened. I told him what was going on, and that not only had I not deliberately sped up to go the speed limit, I had actually slowed down because of how busy the business was. He nodded and went back to measure the skid marks on the road, and confirmed he believed I was actually doing about 25 and complimented my thinking on safe driving in this specific situation. He then proceeded to write the other driver a ticket, and the other driver pulled out of the parking lot a second time, with his window down, flipping me off. At this point, the cop came over to me, explained that he wrote it up as the other driver's fault for more than $1,000 due to the damage on his fender. He also stated that, "Darling, I don't say this often, but I believe you should take that man's insurance company for every dime you can get. Thanks for insisting we call the police." Some people are convinced that, no matter what happens, they're somehow the victim. Unfortunately for this jerk, the cop declined to participate in his fantasy. I once rear-ended someone because I didn't think they'd stop at a yield sign when there weren't any cars coming. It was still 100% my fault. It was really minor. I skidded into them at 5 miles per hour, but I hopped out and immediately apologized sincerely. Dude got out, looked at his bumper, saw no damage, said don't worry about it, and we both went on with our lives. Since it sounds like you were going to do this, I'd like to thank you for being a nice person in that kind of situation. Since the guy was a jerk, you absolutely did the right thing. Stories like these are why I now have a dash cam as of a couple years ago. Thankfully haven't had to put it to use yet, but it's nice knowing I would have hard evidence of douchebaggery on any other driver's part. I watch YouTube dash cams videos. I went and bought a dash cam myself, and I swear my future family will all have a dash cam in their car. The videos also scared me enough that I implemented some new rules so I can avoid as much of that as possible, such as every 10 miles per hour equals 1 2-car distance away, and stopping behind cars means I can see their back tires. I had something similar happen with my wife. In a parking lot, she opened her door and accidentally hit car next to hers. Guy was in the car and got super aggressive, demanding payment, etc. She called me freaked out and I headed over to her. He called the cops in the meantime, and when I arrived, he wasn't near as tough. Cops arrived and looked at his car and asked where the damage was. He pointed it out and cop walked over and wiped the dirt off in the area. There was a very minor ding size of a pencil tip, and the cop pointed out that the damage elsewhere was much worse. They wrote up info for report and told my wife that insurance got involved to tell them that winged court door causing it to swing. Cops gave other drivers shit for calling them out on a nothing call and gave my wife their card in case she had issues. He wasn't violent, they just didn't like him. Never heard from insurance, and dude wasted an hour of everyone's life over a ding on a 15-year-old truck. 9/10 The person who is raging will lose any credibility, and the one who is calm will be heard. One time when backing out of my driveway I checked and no one was behind me, so I backed out fully and suddenly ran into a car that wasn't there before. He had flown through a yield sign at a street that curved into my neighborhood and my house was on the end. I was around 17-18 and this dude was easily in his 50s and screamed all about how I'd owe him a new car and he'd drained me of all the money I had, all over a small dent and some scratches. The cops were called, and since I was backing out of my driveway I have some fault, but since the dude failed to yield and at the same time rear-ended me, the cop told me about how he got a larger ticket. I remember how annoying it was to fix my car cause my brother is a mechanic, so we did it all ourselves. The other dude brought me to court but kept lying about what happened even though there was a police report, so I only ended up having to pay my ticket. I called the non-emergency number when someone rear-ended me fairly hard at a red light because their brakes were bad. No one was hurt, and the dude was polite and totally taking responsibility for my crushed bumper, so I didn't think 911 was appropriate. The non-emergency line told me I had to call 911 in order to get someone dispatched for a report, so while OP's department thanked her for calling him emergency YMMV. The range of interactions is a bell curve, from utterly relaxed at one end to deranged at the other. Almost all are in the reasonable middle. This guy has the needle permanently pegged at bar fight. What a dreadful way to go through life. I am sorry you had to meet him. Even if you were speeding, if he was pulling out of a parking spot and you were going down a road, you still had the right of way. I really don't understand how older people never want to believe they are ever in the wrong when it comes to accidents. In my area, people will let them out parking lot exiters in front of them so much, especially at the corner of a light that has 30 cars lined up waiting, that it's almost like they have row. This is exactly why I have a dashcam and recommend them for everyone I meet. May I ask, do you worry about a dashcam being an attraction to car prowlers? I would like to get one, but I'm afraid that someone would see it and break into my car to get at it. I live in a condo where I can't see my car from my unit. Several years ago, I stopped at a green light to let an ambulance with lights and siren go. The lady behind me ran into me. No damage and no injury, but a police officer saw the whole thing. She jumped out and was wildly animated as she explained her side. I couldn't keep a straight face when she told the officer she stopped at a green light and I was trying to beat the ambulance. Thanks, lady. I appreciate you telling the police it was your fault. Sadly, he did not ticket her, but the look on his face was still priceless. Had a similar experience a few years ago. I was completely stopped at the upward side of a hill because there was a train going by on the other side of the hill. I could have pulled forward because the car in front of me did a U-turn and left, but I wanted to be visible to cars coming behind. I watched this woman for over a mile, and when I realized she was not slowing at all, stood on my brakes, which is the only reason I didn't rear-end the car, stopped 2 car lengths in front of me. This woman never touched her brakes and actually bounced back after hitting me, which is when I noticed she was on her cell phone. I got out of my car briefly to ask how she was. The woman thumbed her nose at me, but a nice gentleman who got out of the car that was behind her asked me how I was while reporting she was OK. Her husband showed up a short while later along with police whom he had evidently summoned. I waited my turn while her husband escorted her up to see police first in a very haughty manner. The cop talked to me just long enough to tell me it was clearly her fault after and said she'd be ticketed while she was getting checked in the ambulance. I went to get checked after and the two of them haughtily put their noses in the air as they passed me like I'd done something to them somehow. Had a woman insist on calling the police after she deliberately hit my car because she didn't want me to pull into the space in front of her. All it did was push my bumper off a bit and it could be popped back into place. No damage to her car. Refused to talk to me. Police take over an hour to arrive and he goes out to tell them that I hit her and I needed to be punished and I was a bitch, etc. Cop comes over to me and I simply go, "Here's my dash cam. She hit me." The cop takes a look and sure enough, it shows that she hit me. She was extremely pissed off and said said, well, maybe next time I'll have a dash cam and then I'll be right. You do that, madam. After she left, he thanked me for remaining calm and not engaging with the crazy. I worked for a rental car company. It was torrential downpour. Was rear-ended at a red light back in 2014. The other guy had his learner's license. He didn't have the required licensed driver who was 25 or older in the car. He had too many occupants in the vehicle. He also didn't have collision insurance. He wrote of both cars. When the cop was interviewing me, I asked him if this was in any way my fault since the rental didn't have collision insurance. He looked at me and said, I don't assign blame. I write tickets. You will be getting no tickets, and he's getting every ticket I can think of to write him. The total cost of my claim after lawyers was 80 plus, and ICBC were going to go after him for the entire amount. I was sitting at a red light waiting to make a left turn and got rear-ended. I had a vintage 1969 VW Beetle in mint condition. Rear-ending those hits the engine. The red-haired middle-aged woman gets out limping and says I had no signal. I pointed at the signal still blinking. No damage to her car, but I tell her to wait while I run home and call police close by on pre-cell phone. I get her license plate number and info. Cop comes and woman left the scene. Ticket issued. Small claims court, etc. No witnesses, so I got screwed. The cop really tried and even took me to her house and used what he called Columbo tactics. Sit outside the house and let them stew. Go talk to them and then sit in the car and make them stew. Cop's theory was that she might have been visiting a lover in that area and couldn't admit to the damage without her husband finding. He warned me not to go try to even the score. Here in Wisconsin, if an accident occurs while someone is pulling out of a driveway parking spot, the fault is always on the person who was pulling out. You need to look both ways when getting back on the road. Not doing so is plain negligence. It's a whole lot easier to stop the car when pulling out at 5 miles per hour compared to the other car going 25 miles per hour. Same goes for rear-ending. It's always the rear-ender's fault unless there's clear, undeniable evidence that they were brake-checked on purpose. I had a chance to really take somebody's insurance for a ride when she slid around an icy corner and sideswiped my classic camper. However, after seeing her car basically totaled and my faded old camper that I already had planned on replacing all the wood on the side she hit still looking fine except for a couple pieces of bent J-rail, and the fact that she was truly apologetic, I just let it go and never filed a claim. Fixed the camper myself just like I had been planning to do, even though I could have had it done professionally for free. Love that he measured the skid marks because it helps settle a disagreement I had with my girlfriend. Almost got slammed by a guy coming around a blind corner and he didn't even try to brake. Luckily I was able to put it in reverse and get out of his way. Girlfriend thought I would have been at blame for an accident, but the fact that this guy didn't even try to brake 25 speed zone makes me think the cops would have ticketed him since the lane was clear from my vantage point when I started to pull out. I was involved in an accident once where I changed lanes without checking my blind spot and hit a vehicle. I felt horrible for making such a stupid mistake and I went up to the guy and told him I was sorry. I admitted fault and that I had already called the police. He starts bitching me out about how it was all my fault, which I had just admitted 5 seconds prior, and how he had witnesses, so don't try to get out of it. Bruh, did you not listen to a word I said? I said it was my fault and I apologized. I get that I made a stupid mistake, but it was just a mistake. Shit happens. I was trying to be an adult about the situation, but he just wanted to lecture me, so I just walked away and waited for the cops at that point. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.